The silver ships came down from the sky like falling stars, their hulls gleaming in the afternoon sun of New Terra. Ambassador Vexthai of the Kalari Empire watched the human settlement grow larger through the viewing port as his ship descended. His forearms moved across the control panels with practiced precision, while his large black eyes studied the primitive structures below. The settlement looked exactly like what the Galactic Council expected from a young species: simple buildings, arranged in defensive patterns around a central area. Behind Vexthai stood the other members of the First Contact Team. Commander Zix of the insectoid Thrix clicked his mandibles nervously as he reviewed tactical data on his wrist display. His compound eyes could see heat signatures moving through the human buildings, but their movements made no sense to his military training. The reptilian Zenth representative, General Koss, flicked his forked tongue to taste the air recycling system and growled low in his throat. His scales shifted from green to yellow, a sign of confusion among his people. The Kalari Empire had been watching this human colony for 8 months through long-range sensors and stealth probes. Everything they learned suggested the humans were typical for their development level. They had basic technology, simple social structures, and the usual territorial instincts that most species showed when they first reached space. The Council expected this first contact to follow standard protocols: formal meetings, displays of strength, careful negotiations about trade and boundaries. Down on the planet's surface, Colony Administrator Hyunwoo Park stood in the central plaza watching the alien ship's approach. His weathered hands held a simple wooden staff that marked his position as leader of the 3,000 humans who called New Terra home. Next to him, Deputy Administrator So-Min Lee checked her tablet one more time, reviewing the first contact procedures they had practiced for months. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and she wore the same simple brown clothing as most colonists. The plaza was not what the aliens expected to find. Instead of defensive positions or military formations, the humans had arranged logs and stones in a large circle around a fire pit. Jin Ho Kim, the colony's cultural liaison, was adding wood to build up the flames while humming an old Korean song his grandmother had taught him. The fire crackled and sent sparks dancing up into the clear sky. Yoonji Nam, head of security, moved through the crowd of gathered humans, not to position weapons or set up barriers, but to make sure everyone had water and that the elderly colonists had comfortable places to sit. The alien ships landed in the designated area outside the settlement with a roar of engines and clouds of dust. Vexthai emerged first from the lead ship, his tall, thin frame moving with the careful grace of a species that had evolved in low gravity. His silver robes marked him as a diplomat, and the translation device around his neck hummed softly as it calibrated to human language patterns. Commander Zix followed, his 6 legs carrying his insect body with quick, nervous steps. His natural armor gleamed black in the sunlight, and his large compound eyes swept constantly across the human gathering, looking for threats that never materialized. General Koss was last to emerge, his massive reptilian form requiring the ship's ramp to be lowered. His scales had shifted to a cautious blue-green, and his clawed hands rested near the energy weapon at his side. All 3 aliens had studied human behavior through their surveillance, but seeing the actual humans in person was different than watching through sensors. The humans did not form battle lines or defensive positions. Instead, they sat in their circle around the fire and waited. Some of them were talking quietly to each other. Others were sharing food from simple bowls. A few were playing with small human children who ran between the logs and laughed at games only they understood. Hyunwoo Park stood and walked forward to meet the aliens, but his movements were calm and unhurried. Vexthai activated his translation device and spoke the formal words he had memorized for first contact situations. His voice carried the authority of the Galactic Council and the weight of interstellar law. He explained that they came in peace, that they represented the civilized species of the galaxy, and that humanity was invited to join the greater community of intelligent life. The words were the same ones used for dozens of first contacts over the centuries. Hyunwoo listened carefully and nodded when the alien ambassador finished speaking. Then he did something that made all 3 aliens step back in confusion. He smiled. Not the aggressive baring of teeth that most species used as a threat display, but a genuine expression of welcome. He gestured toward the fire circle and spoke in simple, clear words that the translation devices picked up easily. The humans, he explained, were honored by the visit. They had prepared a place by the fire where all beings could sit together and share stories. There was food for everyone, water from the settlements, pure springs, and comfortable places to rest. The fire would burn all night if needed, and every voice would be heard with respect. Commander Zix's mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed this information through his tactical training. In his experience, when two military forces met, there were weapons checks, position assessments, and careful negotiations about which side would have advantage. But the humans were offering food and comfort with no apparent thought of tactical positioning. His compound eyes tracked the movement of human children playing near the fire, completely exposed and vulnerable. No species would leave their young, undefended during first contact unless it was some kind of elaborate trap. General Koss tasted the air again and found no scent of fear or aggression from the humans. His species had evolved as predators, and he could read the chemical signals that most creatures gave off when they felt threatened. But these humans smelled of wood smoke and simple food and something else he could not identify, something warm and welcoming that had no place in a first contact situation. Vexthai found himself in a diplomatic situation he had never encountered. In 40 years of representing the Kalari Empire, the humans were not negotiating from positions of strength or weakness. They were not trying to impress the aliens with their technology or intimidate them with their weapons. They were simply inviting them to sit by a fire and talk like old friends meeting after a long journey. So Min Lee approached the group of aliens carrying a tray with simple ceramic cups filled with tea. The beverage was hot and fragrant, made from herbs that grew in the settlement's gardens. She offered the cups with the same quiet hospitality that humans had been showing to strangers for thousands of years. Jin-Ho Kim gestured toward the fire circle, where spaces had been left between the logs for the aliens to sit comfortably, despite their different body shapes. The three aliens looked at each other with expressions that would have been comical if the situation were not so unprecedented. Their military training, diplomatic experience, and cultural knowledge had not prepared them for humans who treated first contact like a neighborhood gathering. They had weapons and shields and formal procedures, but the humans had tea and comfortable seats and a warm fire. Slowly, uncertainly, the alien delegation followed the humans toward the fire circle. As they walked across the plaza, General Koss noticed something that made his scales shift to deep purple with confusion. The human security, Chief Yunjinam, was not watching the aliens for signs of threat. Instead, she was helping an elderly human woman find a good seat near the fire, where she would be warm, but not too close to the smoke. The aliens sat carefully on the logs that had been arranged for them, their different body types making the simple wooden seats an awkward fit. But the humans seemed to understand, and soon Jin-Ho Kim was bringing cushions and adjusting the seating until everyone was comfortable. The fire crackled between them, sending light dancing across faces both human and alien, and for the first time in galactic history, a first contact began with the simple sharing of warmth and stories around an ancient human tradition that no other species in the galaxy had ever developed. The formal ceremonies had been going well for several hours when the forest began to whisper with danger. Ambassador Vexthai was in the middle of presenting the official greetings from 17 different species when his sensitive hearing caught the sound of branches breaking in the darkness beyond the firelight. His forearms tensed automatically, and his large black eyes searched the shadows between the trees that surrounded the human settlement. Commander Zix heard it too. His compound, eyes shifting to track movement that his insect senses could detect better than any other species present. His mandibles began the soft clicking that meant danger to his people, and his 6 legs positioned his body for quick movement. The tactical part of his brain immediately began calculating threat vectors and escape routes while his hand moved toward the energy weapon at his side. General Koss was already rising from his awkward position on the log when the scent hit his sensitive tongue. Blood and fear and hunger, mixed with the wild musk of predators that had been tracking prey for days. His scales shifted rapidly through colors that signaled alarm to any Zenth who might be watching: yellow for danger, red for immediate threat, deep purple for the kind of situation that required swift and decisive action. The humans seemed completely unaware of the approaching danger. Hyunwoo Park continued speaking about the colony's agricultural successes while So-min Lee passed around more tea. Jin-ho Kim was adding another log to the fire, making the flames dance higher and casting more light across the circle of beings who sat together sharing stories. Yoon-ji Nam was still helping elderly colonists get comfortable, apparently oblivious to the fact that deadly predators were moving through the forest toward their gathering. The shadow stalkers had been hunting for 3 days without success. These wolf-like creatures were the apex predators of New Terra's forests, standing nearly as tall as a human at the shoulder, with powerful jaws and claws designed for bringing down prey much larger than themselves. They were intelligent hunters, who worked in coordinated packs and could track their targets across vast distances without being detected by most species. But tonight, their hunt had gone wrong. The pack had been chasing a herd of the deer-like creatures that grazed in the forest clearings when human activity had disrupted the natural patterns of the area. The prey animals had scattered in directions the predators did not expect, and the pack had found themselves separated and hungry in unfamiliar territory. 3 cubs had become lost in the confusion. They were young animals, barely old enough to hunt with the pack, and they had been following scents and sounds for hours trying to find their way back to the other shadow stalkers. Their small bodies were weak with hunger, and scratches from thorns and branches marked their dark fur. The scent of cooking food and the warmth of the fire had drawn them toward the human settlement like a beacon in the darkness. The first cub stumbled into the firelight circle, just as Vexthai was explaining the Galactic Council's trade regulations. The small predator was exhausted and frightened, its yellow eyes reflecting the flames as it looked around at the gathered beings with confusion. Its ribs showed through its matted fur, and one of its front legs was limping from an injury sustained during its wandering through the forest. Commander Zix reacted with the speed and precision of a trained military officer. His energy weapon was in his hand and charging before most of the beings around the fire had even noticed the cub's arrival. His tactical training screamed that predators near a diplomatic gathering meant ambush, assassination, or at minimum a serious breach of security that required immediate neutralization of the threat. General Koss rose to his full impressive height, his scales now showing the bright red that meant imminent combat to any creature smart enough to recognize Zenth warning displays. His clawed hands extended and his powerful tail lashed behind him as he prepared to eliminate the dangerous animal before it could attack the defenseless humans who were sitting exposed around their fire. But before either alien could fire their weapons, something happened that would be discussed in xenopsychology textbooks for centuries to come. Min-Soo Choi, the colony's xenobiologist, slowly reached into his pack and pulled out a piece of dried meat from his evening meal. His movements were careful and deliberate, designed not to startle the frightened animal, and his voice was soft and reassuring as he spoke to the cub in the same tone he might use with a lost child. The cub's ears perked up at the sound, and its nose twitched as it caught the scent of food. Min-Soo placed the meat on the ground halfway between himself and the animal, then sat back and waited patiently. The other humans around the fire watched with quiet attention, but none of them showed fear or reached for weapons. Hai Wan-yoon, who had been a veterinarian before joining the colony, began speaking in gentle tones while slowly moving to get a better look at the cub's injured leg. The alien delegates sat frozen in disbelief as they watched the humans respond to a predator threat with food and medical attention. Every species they knew would either kill a dangerous animal or drive it away from their territory, especially during important diplomatic meetings. But these humans were treating the hungry cub like a guest who had arrived late to their gathering. The second cub appeared a few minutes later, drawn by the scent of food and the warm light of the fire. This one was in even worse condition than the first, with several deep scratches across its back and ribs that stood out sharply against its thin frame. It approached more cautiously, staying at the edge of the firelight while its yellow eyes darted between the humans and aliens. Do-Yun Kim, the colony's engineer, was already moving to construct a simple shelter, using logs and branches from the woodpile that fed the fire. His hands worked with the same practical efficiency he brought to all his projects, building a small windbreak that would protect the cubs from the night air while keeping them close enough to the fire for warmth. The third cub was the smallest and weakest of the group. When it finally stumbled into the circle, it could barely walk, and its breathing was labored from exhaustion and hunger. Eugene Park, who managed the colony's agricultural operations, immediately began preparing a mixture of water and nutrients that would be gentle on the animal's empty stomach. Ambassador Vexthai found himself in a diplomatic crisis that had no precedent in galactic history. His translation device was working perfectly, but he could not understand the words he was hearing from his military advisors. Commander Zix was demanding to know why the humans had not eliminated the predator threat. General Koss was asking for permission to neutralize the dangerous animals before they could attack the defenseless humans. But the humans showed no signs of being afraid or of wanting the cubs to be harmed. The aliens watched in growing confusion as Sang-Ho Lee, the settlement storyteller, continued sharing tales around the fire as if nothing unusual had happened. His stories were about humans and animals living together, about creatures helping each other survive in difficult times, about the bonds that could form between different species when they shared food and shelter and protection. Hai Wan-Yoon had finished her examination of the first cub's injured leg and was now cleaning the wound with supplies from the colony's medical kit. The animal lay still under her gentle hands, apparently understanding that she was trying to help despite being a completely different species. The other cubs had accepted food from the humans and were now lying near the fire, their yellow eyes growing heavy with the first restful sleep they had experienced in days. Commander Zix activated his emergency communication system and began transmitting urgent reports to the Thrix military command. His messages were filled with tactical assessments that made no sense even to himself. The humans had allowed dangerous predators into their defensive perimeter during a critical diplomatic meeting, but instead of treating them as threats, they were providing medical care and shelter. His compound eyes tracked every movement around the fire, but he could not identify any logical military purpose for the humans' actions. General Koss was having similar difficulties explaining the situation to his superiors in the Zenth Dominion. His species had conquered dozens of worlds through superior military strategy, but he had never encountered beings who responded to predators with compassion instead of force. His scales continued to shift through colors of confusion as he tried to understand why the humans were expending valuable resources on creatures that provided no tactical advantage. The fire continued to burn brightly in the center of the circle, casting warm light on a scene that challenged everything the galactic community thought they knew about intelligent species. 3 alien representatives sat rigid with weapons ready while 3 exhausted cubs slept peacefully next to humans who treated them like honored guests instead of dangerous threats. As the night deepened and the cubs settled into comfortable sleep near the fire's warmth, Ambassador Vexthai realized that his first contact mission had become something entirely unprecedented. The humans were not just different in their technology or social structure, they were different in ways that might fundamentally challenge the foundations of galactic civilization. The emergency communications began within minutes of the cubs settling by the fire. Ambassador Vexthai activated his priority transmission array, sending encrypted messages across the vast distances of space to reach the Kalari High Command on their homeworld. His 4 hands moved rapidly across the holographic interface while his large black eyes continued to track the impossible scene unfolding before him. How could he explain to his superiors that the humans were caring for predators during a first contact ceremony? The response from Kalari Command came through with the sharp urgency that marked military communications. Fleet Admiral Nexvor's synthesized voice crackled through the translation matrix, demanding an immediate tactical assessment of the human defensive capabilities. The military leadership wanted to know how the humans had neutralized the predator threat so quickly and why there were no apparent casualties from what should have been a dangerous ambush situation. Vexthai found himself struggling to compose a report that would make sense to beings who had never witnessed such behavior. He described how the humans had responded to dangerous predators by offering food and medical care. But even as he transmitted the words, he knew how they would sound to the military minds receiving them. The Kalari Empire had built their civilization on logical responses to threats, and what the humans were doing had no logical foundation that his people could understand. Commander Zix was having an even more difficult time explaining the situation to the Thrix collective consciousness. His species shared thoughts and experiences through quantum entanglement networks that connected every member of their race across the galaxy. When he tried to transmit his observations of human behavior, the collective response was immediate and confused. Thousands of Thrick's minds examined his sensory data and found no tactical explanation for what the humans were doing. The collective demanded more information. Why had the humans not activated defensive protocols when predators approached their gathering? What advantage did they gain by expending resources on creatures that could not contribute to their survival? How had they achieved interstellar travel with such inefficient emotional responses to danger? The questions came flooding through Zix's neural interface faster than he could process them, each one highlighting another aspect of human behavior that made no sense to his species. General Koss faced his own communication challenges as he tried to explain the situation to the Zenth Dominion War Council. His species had evolved as apex predators themselves, and their entire social structure was based on strength, dominance, and the elimination of weakness. The concept of caring for injured animals that provided no benefit was so alien to Zenth, thinking that his superiors initially assumed his translation systems were malfunctioning. The War Council's response was swift and decisive. They ordered Koss to conduct immediate psychological evaluation of the human leadership to determine if they were suffering from some form of mental illness that prevented them from recognizing threats. The Zenth had encountered species with unusual behaviors before, but always there was some evolutionary advantage that explained the strange customs. They could find no such advantage in what the humans were doing. While the aliens struggled with their communications, the humans continued their work around the fire with quiet efficiency. Do-Yun Kim had completed the simple shelter for the cubs, using nothing more than branches and canvas to create a windbreak that would protect them from the cool night air. His engineering skills were evident in the structure's design, but what puzzled the aliens was why he had bothered to make it comfortable rather than just functional. Yujin Park brought another bowl of the nutrient mixture she had prepared, carefully feeding the weakest cub with a patience that amazed the alien observers. Her agricultural background had taught her about animal nutrition, but her gentle manner with the frightened creature seemed to come from something deeper than professional knowledge. She spoke to the cubs in soft Korean words that the translation devices could not fully capture, but the tone was unmistakably caring. Hai Wan-Yun finished treating the injured cub's leg and moved on to examine the scratches on the second animal's back. Her veterinary training was evident in her skillful handling of the medical procedures, but the aliens noticed that she took extra time to comfort the cubs when they showed signs of fear or pain. To their way of thinking, medical treatment should focus on efficiency and results, not on the emotional well-being of the patient. Sang-Ho Lee continued his storytelling, weaving tales of Earth's history that painted a picture of human civilization unlike anything in the galactic databases. He told stories of humans who had domesticated wolves thousands of years ago, turning dangerous predators into companions and partners. He described cities where humans cared for animals that served no practical purpose except to provide companionship and emotional comfort. The alien delegates listened with growing bewilderment as Sang-Ho explained concepts that had no parallel in their civilizations. He spoke of humans who dedicated their lives to protecting endangered species, of massive resources devoted to veterinary medicine, of laws that protected animals from cruelty even when those animals provided no economic benefit. Each story added another layer to a picture of humanity that challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about intelligent species. Woo Jin Park, the colony historian, joined the storytelling with accounts of human exploration and settlement that emphasized cooperation rather than conquest. He described how early human space missions had included protocols for protecting alien ecosystems, how colonies were designed to coexist with native life forms rather than replace them, how human expansion into space was guided by principles of stewardship rather than exploitation. The aliens exchanged glances that would have been meaningful if they had shared common expressions. Each species was struggling with the same fundamental question: how had humans survived their evolutionary development with such apparently self-destructive behaviors? Every model of species advancement that the galaxy had developed suggested that compassion for the weak led to extinction. Yet here were humans who had achieved interstellar travel while maintaining customs that seemed designed to waste resources on useless creatures. Ambassador Vextai received another priority transmission from Kalari Command, this time requesting detailed psychological profiles of the human leadership. The military wanted to know if the humans were attempting some form of psychological warfare by displaying behavior so contrary to normal species development. The High Command was considering the possibility that human compassion was actually a sophisticated form of intimidation designed to confuse potential enemies. Commander Zix's situation was becoming even more complex as the Thrix Collective began analyzing human behavior patterns from every angle they could imagine. Military strategists were developing theories about how caring for predators might be part of an advanced training program for human warriors. Economic analysts were trying to calculate what hidden benefits the humans might gain from their apparently wasteful use of resources. Social scientists were exploring the possibility that human emotions were actually sophisticated manipulation tools. But none of the theories made sense when applied to what the aliens were actually observing. The humans showed no signs of deception or hidden agendas. Their care for the cubs appeared to be genuine and instinctive, driven by emotional responses rather than calculated strategies. This made their behavior even more disturbing to species that had built their civilizations on logical foundations. General Koss faced the most direct questions from his superiors, who demanded to know why he had not simply eliminated the predator threat himself if the humans were too weak or confused to handle it properly. The Zenth approach to dangerous animals was straightforward: kill them quickly and efficiently, then dispose of the remains. The concept of treating injured predators and providing them with food and shelter was so foreign to Zenth, thinking that some members of the War Council suggested the humans might be suffering from a contagious mental illness. As the night progressed, and the cubs slept peacefully by the fire, the alien communications networks buzzed with unprecedented activity. Reports of human behavior were being transmitted across the galaxy, reaching the homeworlds of dozens of species and causing confusion in governmental, military, and scientific circles. Emergency sessions were being called in the Galactic Council. Chambers as representatives tried to understand what their first contact teams were reporting. The humans, meanwhile, continued their quiet work around the fire, unaware that their simple acts of kindness were causing a crisis of understanding that reached across star systems. Jinho Kim added more wood to keep the fire burning steadily through the night. Yunjinam continued to ensure everyone's comfort, bringing blankets for both humans and aliens as the temperature dropped. Hyunwoo Park and So-Min Lee discussed plans for the morning, including how to help the cubs reunite with their pack once they were strong enough to travel. The fire crackled softly in the center of the circle, its warm light illuminating a scene that would be remembered in galactic history as the moment when the universe discovered that evolution could take paths no one had imagined possible. The night deepened around New Terra's central plaza, and with it came a transformation that none of the alien observers could have anticipated. As the three cubs settled into comfortable sleep near the fire's warmth, the true scope of human abnormality began to reveal itself through actions that seemed so natural to the colonists that they required no discussion or planning. Ji Woo-nam, the colony's doctor, arrived at the fire circle carrying her medical kit after receiving word about the injured animals. Her approach was calm and methodical, the same way she would respond to any patient requiring care. The aliens watched in fascination as she knelt beside the sleeping cubs and began a thorough examination of each animal, checking for injuries and signs of illness with the same attention she would give to human patients. Ambassador Vextai activated his personal recording system to document what he was witnessing. His 4 hands moved across the control interface, while his large black eyes tracked every detail of the human doctor's behavior. He needed visual evidence of what he was seeing because his superiors at Kalari Command would never believe a simple verbal report of humans providing advanced medical care to dangerous predators. The Kalari Empire had encountered hundreds of species during their expansion across the galaxy, and everyone followed predictable patterns of resource allocation. Medical supplies were precious and limited, reserved for productive members of society who could contribute to survival and growth. The idea of using expensive medical equipment on animals that provided no benefit was so contrary to logical thinking that Vexthai's own training made him question what he was seeing. Commander Zix's compound eyes registered every movement as Dr. Jiwoo checked the cub's vital signs using instruments that were clearly designed for human physiology, but which she adapted with remarkable skill for the different anatomy of the forest creatures. His tactical mind tried to calculate the cost of the medical supplies being used, the time being invested, and the potential risk to the human community of harboring dangerous predators. The Thrix collective consciousness was analyzing his sensory data in real time, thousands of minds working together to understand the strategic implications of human behavior. Military analysts were developing theories about how medical training with alien species might prepare human doctors for treating wounded soldiers in combat situations. Economic specialists were calculating whether the humans might be planning to domesticate the predators for some unknown purpose. But none of the theories explained why Dr. Jiwoo spoke to the cubs in the same gentle tones she would use with frightened children, or why she took extra care to avoid causing them discomfort. During her examination, the medical procedures were competent and thorough, but they were also infused with something the aliens had never seen in medical treatment: genuine concern for the patient's emotional well-being. General Koss watched the scene with growing confusion that showed in the rapid color changes of his scales. In Zenth society, medical treatment was efficient and practical, focused on returning warriors to fighting condition as quickly as possible. The concept of bedside manner was unknown to his species, and the idea of comforting patients who could not understand the treatment was completely foreign. His communication with the Zenth Dominion War Council had become increasingly difficult, as he tried to explain behaviors that had no equivalent in their language. How could he describe the way Dr. Jiwoo paused her examination when one of the cubs showed signs of distress, or the way she waited patiently for the animal to relax before continuing? The War Council demanded tactical explanations for everything they were hearing, but Koss had no tactical framework that could make sense of human compassion. Tae-jin Yoon arrived at the fire circle as Dr. Jiwoo was completing her medical assessment. As the colony's child psychologist, he had no formal training in animal behavior, but his understanding of trauma and recovery proved surprisingly applicable to the situation the cubs faced. The aliens watched in amazement as he began working, with the frightened animals using the same techniques he would employ with human children who had experienced difficult situations. The psychological approach that Tae-jin used was completely outside the experience of any species the aliens knew. He spoke to the cubs in calm, reassuring tones while maintaining a respectful distance that allowed them to feel safe. He offered food only when the animals showed interest, and he moved slowly to avoid triggering their flight responses. Most remarkably to the alien observers, he seemed to understand that the cubs needed time to process their experiences rather than simply having their immediate physical needs met. Vexthai found himself transmitting reports to Kalari Command that sounded increasingly impossible even to his own ears. He described humans who treated animal psychology as seriously as they treated human psychology, who invested time and expertise in understanding the emotional needs of creatures that could never reciprocate their care. The response from his superiors was a demand for complete psychological evaluation of all human leadership, as they could only conclude that the entire colony was suffering from some form of collective mental illness. The night air grew cooler, and the aliens observed another display of human behavior that challenged their understanding of resource management. Jin-Ho Kim brought blankets from the settlement's supplies and carefully placed them over the sleeping cubs, adjusting the coverings to ensure the animals would stay warm without feeling trapped or confined. The blankets were clearly valuable items, woven from materials that required time and skill to produce. Yet the humans were using them on creatures that might leave in the morning and never be seen again. Woojin Park continued sharing stories from Earth's history, but now his tales focused on the development of human society and its relationship with other species. He described how ancient human civilizations had created elaborate systems for caring for animals, how they had developed veterinary medicine thousands of years before achieving space travel, how they had built their cities around parks and gardens, where both humans and animals could live comfortably. The aliens listened with growing bewilderment as Woojin explained concepts that existed nowhere else in galactic civilization. He spoke of humans who had chosen professions dedicated entirely to animal welfare, who had spent their entire lives working to protect species that provided no economic benefit. He described massive human institutions devoted to rescuing and rehabilitating injured wildlife, funded by voluntary contributions from humans who would never see the animals they were helping. Commander Zix transmitted urgent queries to the Thrix collective about whether any known species had ever developed similar behaviors. The response came back quickly. No intelligent species in recorded galactic history had ever devoted significant resources to caring for creatures that could not contribute to their survival. The behavior was so unprecedented that xenobiologists across the galaxy were being awakened from sleep to analyze the reports coming from New Terra. The collective consciousness was struggling to process information that contradicted every model of species development they had ever created. The Thrix had built their civilization on the principle that every action must contribute to the greater good of the hive, and individual emotions were subordinated to collective efficiency. The idea that humans could achieve technological advancement while maintaining such apparently wasteful emotional responses was shaking the foundation of their understanding of evolution. Dr. Jiwoo completed her examination and began preparing a treatment plan for the cubs' recovery. She explained to the gathered aliens that the animals would need several days of rest and proper nutrition before they would be strong enough to return to the forest. Her tone was matter-of-fact, as if caring for injured predators was a normal part of colony life rather than an extraordinary deviation from standard behavior. The aliens exchanged glances that conveyed their shared confusion. Every species they knew would have made a simple calculation. The cubs were a drain on resources with no potential return on investment. The logical response would be to provide minimal care until the animals could be released, or simply eliminate them if they posed any potential threat. But the humans were planning comprehensive rehabilitation, as if the cubs were valued members of their community. General Koss received another transmission from the Zenth Dominion, demanding answers to questions he could not provide. How had humans developed advanced technology while wasting resources on useless creatures? What military advantage did they gain from displaying weakness and emotional vulnerability? How could they maintain effective defense systems when their decision-making was influenced by irrational emotional responses to every injured animal they encountered? The questions highlighted a growing crisis in galactic understanding that extended far beyond the situation on New Terra. If humans could achieve interstellar travel while maintaining such apparently self-destructive behaviors, what did that mean for every theory of species development that the galaxy had developed over millions of years of civilization? The implications were staggering, and emergency sessions were being called in scientific institutions across dozens of worlds. As the fire burned lower in the center of the circle, dawn came to New Terra with the soft golden light that had made the planet so appealing to human colonists. The fire in the central plaza had burned down to glowing embers, but the warmth it provided had been enough to keep both humans and cubs comfortable through the cool night. As the first rays of sunlight touched the settlement, the 3 Shadowstalker cubs began to stir from their peaceful sleep, looking healthier and more alert than they had when they first stumbled into the firelight circle. Insu Kim arrived early at the plaza carrying equipment and supplies that immediately caught the attention of the alien observers. As the colony's wildlife specialist, he had spent the night preparing a comprehensive plan for rehabilitating the cubs and eventually reuniting them with their pack. The aliens watched in continued amazement as he began setting up monitoring equipment to track the cubs' health and recovery progress. Ambassador Vexthai had been awake most of the night, transmitting reports and receiving increasingly urgent communications from Kalari Command. The response from his superiors had evolved from confusion to alarm as the implications of human behavior became clear to military and political leaders across the galaxy. His latest orders were to establish a permanent research station on New Terra and begin comprehensive studies of human society that might explain how they had survived their evolutionary development. The message he prepared for transmission that morning would become one of the most significant documents in galactic history. "We have encountered a species that weaponizes compassion," he wrote, choosing words that would convey the unprecedented nature of the situation to readers who had no framework for understanding what he was describing. Their emotional responses, to injured creatures appear to be their greatest source of strength, rather than a weakness that should have led to extinction. The report continued with detailed observations of human behavior that challenged every assumption the galaxy had made about intelligent species development. Vexthai described how humans had achieved technological advancement, not despite their emotional connections to other creatures, but because of them. Their capacity for empathy had driven innovations in medicine, engineering, and social organization that other species had never considered necessary. Commander Zix faced the most complex communication challenge of his career as he tried to explain to the Thrix collective consciousness why human society had succeeded where logic suggested it should have failed. The collective had spent the night analyzing every piece of data about human civilization they could access, and their conclusions were troubling to a species that based their entire existence on efficient resource allocation and logical decision-making. The Thrix had discovered that humans routinely expended enormous resources on medical care for individuals who could not contribute to society, that they maintained massive systems for educating children who might never provide economic benefits, that they devoted significant portions of their planetary resources to preserving natural environments that served no practical purpose. By every measure the Thrix used to evaluate civilizations, humanity should have collapsed under the weight of its own inefficiency. But the evidence was undeniable. Humans had not only survived, but thrived. They had developed technologies that other species considered impossible, created social structures that maintained stability across vast distances and diverse populations, and achieved interstellar travel while maintaining the same emotional connections that should have been discarded as evolutionary baggage. The collective consciousness was experiencing something unprecedented in Thrix history: fundamental doubt about their own approach to civilization. General Koss received orders from the Zenth Dominion War Council that reflected the growing crisis of understanding throughout the galaxy. He was instructed to conduct detailed psychological evaluations of human military capabilities, with particular attention to how their emotional responses might translate into combat effectiveness. The War Council needed to know whether human compassion was a weakness that could be exploited, or a strength that posed a threat to established galactic powers. The Cubs had awakened fully and were exploring their temporary shelter with the curiosity of young animals who felt safe for the first time in days. Dr. Jiwoo arrived to check on their recovery progress, bringing fresh medical supplies and continuing the treatment plan she had developed during the night. The aliens observed her work with the same fascination they had shown the previous evening, but now their attention was focused on understanding how human medical care might represent a fundamentally different approach to civilization. Insu. Kim began explaining his rehabilitation plan to the gathered aliens, describing how the Cubs would be gradually prepared for release back into their natural habitat. His approach involved not just medical care and nutrition, but also behavioral conditioning to ensure the young predators would be able to survive and integrate successfully with their pack. The level of planning and resource commitment required for such a project was staggering to species that calculated every expenditure in terms of immediate returns. The alien delegates found themselves witnessing something that would reshape galactic understanding of intelligence and civilization. Tae-Jin Yoon worked with the Cubs using psychological techniques that helped them process their traumatic separation from their pack, while Yoo-Jin Park developed specialized nutrition plans that would support their growth and development during recovery. Every aspect of the human response demonstrated a level of care and attention that had no parallel in galactic society. Sang-Ho Lee continued his storytelling, but now his tales were focused on helping the aliens understand how human compassion had become the foundation of their technological and social advancement. He described how human medicine had developed from their desire to heal suffering, how their engineering innovations had been driven by needs to care for their communities, how their exploration of space had been motivated by dreams of finding new homes for their growing population. Woo-Jin Park added historical context that painted a picture of human development unlike anything in galactic databases. He explained how human societies had succeeded by caring for their weakest members rather than abandoning them, how their greatest innovations had come from individuals who were supported by communities that valued them regardless of their immediate productivity, how their expansion into space had been guided by principles of stewardship rather than exploitation. The aliens began to understand that they were not just observing unusual behavior, but witnessing the foundation of an entirely different approach to civilization. Human success was built on principles that contradicted everything the galaxy thought it knew about survival and advancement. Yet the evidence of their achievements was undeniable. Ambassador Vextai composed his final report of the morning with hands that trembled slightly as he considered the implications of what he was writing. The Galactic Council would need to fundamentally reconsider their understanding of intelligence, civilization, and the paths that species could take to achieve technological advancement. The discovery of humanity would force a complete revision of xenobiology, evolutionary theory, and galactic politics. As the morning progressed, the cubs grew stronger and more playful under human care. The aliens watched In-Soo Kim prepare tracking, equipment that would allow the colony to monitor the cubs after their release, ensuring their successful integration with their pack. The level of long-term commitment to creatures that would provide no benefit to human society was unprecedented in galactic experience. The formal first contact ceremonies resumed with an atmosphere completely different from the previous day. The aliens no longer saw the humans as a typical emerging species, to be evaluated and categorized according to standard protocols. Instead, they found themselves in the presence of beings who represented a completely new model of intelligent civilization, one that challenged the fundamental assumptions upon which galactic society had been built. Hyunwoo Park formally invited the alien delegation to establish a permanent research station on New Terra, recognizing that the cultural exchange would benefit both humanity and the galactic community. As the aliens accepted the invitation, they knew they were beginning a study that would reshape understanding across the galaxy. The story concluded as the rehabilitated cubs were successfully reunited with their pack at the edge of the forest, healthy and strong after days of human care. The scene was witnessed by both humans and aliens working together around a new campfire, and the aliens no longer held their breath from fear of the unknown, but from the dawning realization that they had discovered something that would fundamentally change galactic civilization forever. The cubs disappeared into the forest with their pack, but the impact of their brief stay with humanity would ripple across the galaxy for generations to come. The aliens had learned that the power of unconditional kindness was not a weakness to be overcome, but a strength that could reshape the universe itself.